My female boss declined to book my flight for a $5 million deal. She mocked me, saying, "Why bring useless baggage? LOL. But there was one thing she had no clue about. The client's CEO happens to be my brother. I grinned and said, "All the best for your meeting." I worked day and night to secure a $5 million deal for my company, the biggest contract we had seen in years. But just when it was time for the final meeting with the client's CEO, my boss, Lisa, refused to book my flight. She leaned back in her chair, smirking, and said, "Why would I waste company money on bringing trash?" The entire office went silent. My heart pounded, but I stayed calm. I had heard her cruel remarks before, but this time, she had no idea what she was walking into. I could have argued, but I didn't. Instead, I simply smiled. Lisa thought she had all the power, that she could humiliate me and take the credit for my work. But there was one thing she didn't know. The CEO she was about to meet wasn't just a business partner. He was my brother. So I leaned in, keeping my voice steady, and said, "Good luck in the meeting." Her confidence didn't waver. Not yet. But I knew the moment she walked into that boardroom, she was in for the shock of her life. And I couldn't wait to see her face when she realized what she had done. Lisa strutted out of the office, heels clicking against the polished floor, completely unaware of the disaster waiting for her. I watched as she confidently made her way to the elevator, her assistant trailing behind, carrying the files I had spent weeks preparing. I felt a mix of frustration and amusement. She thought she had outplayed me, but she had just sealed her own fate. As soon as she was gone, my colleagues started whispering. "She really didn't book your flight?" one of them asked in disbelief. I just nodded, keeping my expression unreadable. There was no need to explain. In just a few hours, everything would become clear. I glanced at my phone. A message from my brother, Daniel, popped up. "Boardroom in 3 hours. Everything set?" I smirked as I typed back, "More than ready." Lisa had no idea she was about to walk into a meeting where she was already at a disadvantage. She had spent months belittling me, treating me as if I were invisible. She had no clue that the client CEO, her last hope for landing the biggest deal of her career, was my own blood. I thought back to how it all started. Lisa had always been difficult to work with, but ever since I joined the company, she had made it her mission to undermine me. Maybe it was because I didn't come from a fancy background like her. Maybe it was because I didn't dress in designer brands or boast about expensive vacations. Or maybe she just didn't like the fact that, despite everything, I was still the one closing deals. For months, I bit my tongue, focusing on my work. I didn't need her approval. But when this deal came along, I knew she wouldn't let me have it. I had put in all the work, built the client relationship from the ground up, and secured the meeting. But when it was time to present, she conveniently decided that I wasn't needed on the trip. I played along, knowing my moment would come. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a picture of Lisa, sitting at the airport lounge, sipping coffee, completely relaxed. I chuckled to myself. She had no idea that she was walking into a room where my presence was already expected. I made my way home, taking my time. There was no rush. I wasn't the one who needed to impress anyone today. 3 hours later, I sat in my living room, phone in hand, watching the clock. By now, Lisa would have entered the boardroom, flashing her best fake smile, expecting to charm her way through the meeting. I imagined the moment Daniel walked in, the moment their eyes met, the moment she realized that the very person she had refused to include in this deal was the one who mattered most in that room. Then, my phone rang. It was my brother. I answered, waiting for his voice. There was a pause before he finally spoke. "You should have been here," he said, amusement laced in his voice. Lisa looked like she saw a ghost. I leaned back, grinning. "Tell me everything." He let out a low chuckle. She walked in all confident, shaking hands, talking about how excited she was for the collaboration. Then she saw me. I could picture it in my head, her fake confidence cracking, the panic in her eyes as realization set in. She turned pale, Daniel continued. And for the first 5 minutes, she kept trying to act like she had things under control. Then I asked her one simple question. "Where's my brother?" I smirked, waiting for him to continue. She stuttered, he said. Mumbled something about you being too junior to attend. That's when I stopped her and said, "Actually, he's the reason we're even considering this deal." I let out a laugh. And then she tried to spin it. Said she had full confidence in your work, but thought it would be best for the company if she handled negotiations alone. I shook my head. Classic Lisa. Always twisting the truth to cover up her own mistakes. Daniel sighed. So I told her, "That's interesting, because the only person I wanted to discuss this deal with was him." There was a long pause before he added. She panicked. You could see it all over her face. And that's when I dropped the bomb. I leaned forward. "What did you say?" I told her we were pulling out. Silence filled the air. Even though I had expected something big, hearing those words made my chest tighten. This deal was everything to the company. Lisa had bet everything on it. And now it was slipping through her fingers. She started scrambling, Daniel said. Trying to backtrack, making excuses, even offering to call you in. But I told her it was too late. I took a deep breath, letting it all sink in. After everything, Lisa was finally facing the consequences of her actions. Daniel sighed. I could have let her suffer more, but I gave her one last option. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of option? She had 2 choices, he said. Either she calls you personally, apologizes, and lets you take over the deal, or we walk away for good. My heart pounded. Lisa, apologizing? That was something I never thought I'd see. She didn't like it, Daniel admitted. But she had no choice. I exhaled, knowing what was coming next. A few seconds later, my phone vibrated. Lisa's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring a few times before answering. Hello? There was silence on the other end. Then, finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. We need to talk. I let the silence stretch for a moment, listening to Lisa's hesitant breathing on the other end. She wasn't the type to admit mistakes, and I could tell how much it hurt her pride to even make this call. Part of me wanted to let her sit in her discomfort, but another part of me was curious. How far was she willing to go to save herself? What do you want to talk about? I finally asked, keeping my voice neutral. She cleared her throat, as if trying to compose herself. I think there was a misunderstanding. I almost laughed. A misunderstanding? That was her excuse now? After everything? Oh, I said, playing along. What kind of misunderstanding? There was a pause. I could practically hear her trying to find the right words, something that wouldn't make her look weak, but would also convince me to fix the mess she had created. I may have misjudged the situation, she admitted, her voice tight. Daniel, Mr. Carter, made it clear that he values your input, and I think it's only right that you join the meeting. She was trying to make it sound like a logical business decision, as if she had come to this conclusion on her own. But we both knew the truth. She wasn't inviting me out of respect. She was desperate. I leaned back, tapping my fingers on the desk. Lisa, you were very clear earlier, I reminded her. You said I wasn't needed. That I was trash, remember? She sucked in a sharp breath. She knew I wasn't going to let her off the hook easily. That was a poor choice of words, she muttered. I let my emotions get the best of me. I let out a short laugh. Your emotions? Lisa, this isn't about emotions. This is about the fact that you tried to take credit for my work, and it blew up in your face. Silence. For the first time, Lisa had nothing to say. I could have dragged it out longer, made her beg, but I wasn't interested in playing games. Instead, I decided to get straight to the point. What do you need from me, Lisa? She hesitated. Then, in the quietest voice I had ever heard from her, she said, I need you to fix this. There it was. The truth. She needed me. Not because she respected me. Not because she valued my work. But because she had no other choice. I exhaled slowly, pretending to think it over. And what do I get in return? Lisa was caught off guard. Excuse me? You heard me, I said. What do I get for saving you? Her voice turned defensive. This isn't about, because from where I'm standing, I interrupted, you humiliated me in front of the entire office, took my work, and cut me out of a deal I built from the ground up. And now that you're in trouble, you expect me to come running. She said nothing. I continued, my tone firm. I'll consider helping on one condition. I want my name on this deal, officially. That means full credit, full involvement, and from now on, any deal I close, I lead. Lisa wasn't used to being challenged. But she also didn't have any leverage anymore. If she wanted to salvage this deal, she needed me. A long silence stretched between us. Then, finally, she sighed. Fine. That one word carried so much weight. She had fought so hard to keep me beneath her, but now she had no choice but to acknowledge my value. Send me the flight details, I said, my voice steady. I'll see you at the meeting. I hung up before she could say anything else. I sat there for a moment, processing what had just happened. A part of me felt victorious. But another part of me knew this wasn't over. Lisa wasn't the type to let something like this go. She may have agreed now, but I knew she was already plotting her next move. This was only the beginning. The next morning, I arrived at the airport, my boarding pass in hand. Lisa had done what I asked, booked my flight, sent over the official documentation listing me as the lead on the deal, and even included a formal email acknowledging my contributions. But I wasn't naive. This wasn't an act of goodwill. It was survival. She was just buying herself time, waiting for the moment she could take back control. The flight was smooth, but my mind was anything but calm. I kept thinking about what Lisa might try to pull next. Would she attempt to downplay my role in front of the client? Would she try to discredit me before the meeting even started? Whatever it was, I had to be ready. When I landed, a car was already waiting. My brother had arranged everything. As I settled into the back seat, my phone buzzed. A message from Lisa. We'll meet in the lobby at 2:30. Don't be late. I smirked. Even now, she was trying to assert control. I didn't respond. Instead, I stared out the window, mentally preparing myself. At exactly 2:30, I walked into the hotel lobby. Lisa was already there, tapping her nails against her phone, dressed in her usual sharp, expensive suit. The moment she saw me, her expression flickered, just for a second. It wasn't fear, exactly. More like unease. She knew she had lost control of the situation, and she hated it. You're here, she said, forcing a smile. Good. I nodded, not bothering to return the fake pleasantries. Let's go. We walked through the towering glass doors of the conference room. Inside, executives from the client's company were already seated. The air was thick with tension. This wasn't just any deal, this was a multi-million-dollar contract that could shape the future of our company. And at the head of the table sat my brother, Daniel. Lisa hesitated for half a second before pasting on her usual confident smile. Mr. Carter, she greeted, extending her hand. It's a pleasure to see you again. Daniel shook her hand, but his expression remained unreadable. Lisa, he said coolly. Then his eyes met mine, and his face softened just slightly. Glad you made it. Lisa tensed beside me, as if she had just remembered that she wasn't in charge here. The meeting started, and as expected, Lisa took the lead, talking numbers, projections, and strategies. She was good at what she did, there was no denying that. But there was something different this time. A nervous edge to her voice. Every time she spoke, she would glance at Daniel, waiting for his approval, only to receive a blank stare in return. Then, the moment I had been waiting for arrived. Daniel leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together. I appreciate the overview, he said. But before we go any further, I need to hear directly from the person who brought this deal to us. The room fell silent. Lisa's smile didn't falter, but I saw the way her fingers clenched slightly on the table. She had spent months shutting me out, pretending I didn't matter. And now, in front of everyone, she had to step aside. I cleared my throat, leaning forward. Thank you, I said, meeting my brother's gaze. Then I turned to the rest of the executives, ready to take control of the room. This deal started with one goal, creating a partnership that benefits both sides. Let me walk you through exactly how we plan to make that happen. I launched into my presentation, outlining every detail I had spent months perfecting. I knew this deal better than anyone in the room, and as I spoke, I saw the shift happening. The executives were nodding, engaged. Even the skeptical ones were listening. Lisa, on the other hand, was silent. As I finished my pitch, Daniel smiled. That's exactly the vision we're looking for. Lisa jumped in quickly. Of course, our entire team has worked hard to. Daniel cut her off. And we'll be dealing directly with the person who made this happen, he said, looking at me. Which means all final negotiations will go through him. The air in the room changed. Lisa's face barely moved, but I could see the panic creeping in. She had just been sidelined. I watched her carefully, waiting for her reaction. But instead of arguing, she simply nodded. Understood, she said, her voice controlled. That's when I knew. She wasn't done yet. She was planning something. And whatever it was going to be big. Lisa's silence was unnatural. I knew her well enough to recognize when she was scheming, and the way she kept her expression neutral, her posture stiff, told me she wasn't going to let this slide. She wasn't the type to accept defeat, especially not in front of an audience. The meeting wrapped up, and the executives left one by one, nodding in approval as they passed me. Daniel gave me a small, satisfied nod before stepping away to take a call. That left just Lisa and me in the conference room. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, slowly, she turned to me, her lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. Well played, she murmured. You really think you've won? I held her gaze, refusing to let her get under my skin. I didn't need to play a game, Lisa. I just did my job. She let out a soft laugh, shaking her head as if she found something amusing. You have no idea what's coming. A prickle of unease ran down my spine, but I didn't let it show. What does that mean? She glanced at her watch, then back at me, her eyes gleaming with something close to victory. You'll see soon enough. Then she turned and walked out, leaving me standing there, unsettled. I didn't like this. Whatever she was planning, it wasn't over. As I stepped out into the lobby, my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. Meet me in my office. Now. I hurried to his floor, pushing open the door to find him standing by the window, arms crossed. His jaw was tight. What's going on? I asked, closing the door behind me. Daniel exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. I just got a call from one of the board members. They received a complaint about you. I froze. What? He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. Lisa filed an official report against you. Claimed you tried to sabotage the deal and acted unprofessionally. I felt my stomach drop. That's ridiculous. You were in the meeting, you saw everything. Daniel nodded. I know. And so does everyone else in that room. But that's not the point. She's not trying to win on facts. She's trying to create doubt. I ran a hand through my hair, frustration boiling inside me. Of course, Lisa wouldn't just walk away. She was twisting the situation, trying to turn the company against me before I could fully cement my role. She's trying to force me out, I muttered. Make me look unreliable so I don't get control over the deal. Daniel's jaw tightened. Exactly. I shook my head, my pulse pounding. So what happens now? He hesitated. The board is holding an emergency review tomorrow. They want to hear both sides. I let out a sharp laugh, disbelief flooding through me. Unbelievable. She's the one who tried to cut me out, and now I'm the one under review. Daniel's gaze was steady. This isn't about what's fair. It's about control. Lisa's desperate. She's throwing everything she has at you to stay in power. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to think. I couldn't let her rattle me. If she wanted a fight, she was going to get one. So what do we do? I asked, meeting my brother's eyes. Daniel's lips twitched into a knowing smile. We remind them exactly who brought this deal to the table. I nodded, understanding. Lisa had played her card. Now it was my turn. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The tension in the air was thick. Everyone had heard about the emergency board meeting, and whispers filled the hallways. Some of my colleagues gave me uncertain glances, as if they weren't sure whether to offer support or distance themselves in case things went south. I walked into the boardroom, my heartbeat steady but my mind racing. Lisa was already there, sitting at the long table with a composed expression, hands folded neatly in front of her. She looked calm, too calm. It was an act. I had seen this before. She was confident that she had outmaneuvered me. The board members trickled in, murmuring amongst themselves. At the head of the table, Daniel sat with a neutral expression, but I knew him well enough to see the fire burning behind his eyes. He wasn't just here as the CEO of the client's company, he was here as my brother. The chairman cleared his throat. We're here to discuss allegations of professional misconduct. His eyes moved between me and Lisa. Lisa, you filed the complaint. You may begin. Lisa straightened her posture, her voice smooth and controlled. Thank you. She turned to the room, putting on her best performance. I regret that we've reached this point, but I felt it was necessary to bring these concerns forward. While my colleague, she glanced at me with a tight smile, has contributed to the deal, his actions in recent days have been unpredictable. He has attempted to undermine the process, disregarded protocol, and has even leveraged personal relationships for influence. I almost laughed at the sheer audacity of her words. She was twisting reality so seamlessly, acting as if she were the victim instead of the instigator. She continued, her voice full of false concern. I have always prioritized this company's interests, and my only goal has been to ensure the success of this deal. However, with these recent developments, I fear that allowing him to continue in a leadership role could jeopardize everything we've built. Silence followed her words. She sat back, satisfied, as if she had already won. Then the chairman turned to me. Do you have a response? I met Lisa's gaze for a brief second before addressing the board. I do. I kept my voice steady, controlled. Lisa has been with this company for years, and I don't doubt her dedication. But what she's not telling you is that this deal was my work from the start. I built the relationship with the client. I negotiated terms. I secured the meeting. I let my words sink in before adding, and when it was time to close the deal, Lisa actively tried to remove me from it. The board members exchanged glances. Lisa's face remained unreadable, but I could see the stiffness in her shoulders. I leaned forward slightly. Let's talk about facts. Lisa refused to book my flight. She attended the meeting alone, fully intending to take credit for the deal. She only called me when she realized she had no other choice. One of the board members frowned. Lisa, is this true? Lisa let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. That's a very dramatic interpretation of events. I made a decision that I believed was best for the company at the time. I didn't let her get away with it. Then let's ask the client directly. A murmur spread across the room. Lisa's head snapped toward me. Excuse me? I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. Daniel Carter, the CEO of our client's company, is on the line. Lisa's expression faltered for the first time. She hadn't expected this. I pressed the speaker button and Daniel's voice filled the room. Good morning, everyone. The chairman straightened. Mr. Carter, thank you for joining us. There have been concerns raised about the handling of the negotiations. Can you clarify who is responsible for securing this deal? There was a pause before Daniel replied, his voice firm. The only reason we are signing this contract is because of him. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel continued. He built this relationship from the ground up. He understood our needs, earned our trust, and proved his value. If he weren't involved, we wouldn't be moving forward with this deal at all. Lisa's composure finally cracked. She turned pale, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. The chairman nodded slowly. That's very clear. He turned to Lisa. Do you have anything to say in response? Lisa opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had lost. The chairman sighed. Then the decision is simple. The deal will proceed under his leadership. Effective immediately. Relief washed over me, but I kept my face calm. I had won. But then, just as the tension in the room seemed to settle, Lisa spoke. I resign. The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Everyone turned to her in shock. She pushed back her chair, standing with a forced smile. It's clear where the board's priorities lie. I won't waste my time where I'm not valued. I studied her carefully. This wasn't surrender. This was her way of leaving on her terms. Without another word, she gathered her things and walked out of the room. The board sat in stunned silence before the chairman finally nodded. Well, that settles that. As the meeting adjourned, I exhaled, the weight of the past few days finally lifting. But just as I stepped out into the hallway, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Lisa. You think this is over? Watch your back. A chill ran through me. The battle was won. But the war had just begun. I stared at the message on my screen, Lisa's final warning lingering in my mind. Even after losing, she couldn't walk away quietly. She had built her career on control, on bending situations in her favor. And now, with everything slipping through her fingers, she was looking for a way to claw back. But I wasn't afraid. As I stood in the empty hallway, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: certainty. Lisa might try to scheme. She might try to manipulate things from the outside. But the truth was, she no longer had power over me. The board had spoken. The company had seen the reality of who was bringing in results. And most importantly, I had proven, without a doubt, that I wasn't someone who could be erased. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was from Daniel. Proud of you. Let's get to work. I smiled, slipping my phone back into my pocket. He had always believed in me, but now I had earned this on my own. The deal was done, the board had made their decision, and Lisa was gone. For the first time since joining this company, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. As I walked back to my office, my colleagues greeted me with nods and quiet smiles. Some looked relieved, others impressed. They had all seen how Lisa operated, but no one had ever challenged her before. Today, that changed. I sat at my desk, looking at the files in front of me. The contract with Daniel's company was right there, waiting to be finalized. This was the start of something bigger, not just for the company, but for me. I had fought to be here, to be recognized, and now there was no one left to block my path. A deep breath filled my lungs, and I exhaled slowly. The last few days had been a battle, but I had won it on my terms. No shortcuts. No games. Just the truth. I knew Lisa wouldn't let this go easily, but that was a problem for another day. Right now, I had a job to do. I had built this deal, and now I was going to see it through. The door to my office swung open, and Daniel walked in, a smirk on his face. "You ready?" I met his gaze, nodding. More than ready. As I reached for the pen to sign the final paperwork, I felt the weight of everything that had happened, the challenges, the betrayals, the doubts. But in that moment, none of it mattered anymore. Lisa was gone. The deal was mine, and my future was finally in my hands. I pressed the pen to the paper, leaving my signature at the bottom. It was time to move forward.